Good morning. It is Wednesday. It is the 28th of September, 2022. This is the Gold Spot.
The world is in chaos. The economic situation is getting worse and worse. Countries are starting to criticize each other. It appears that our, quote, economic brain trust is determined to keep repeating the mistakes of the past. What's coming?
Some really interesting changes, and I'm a little fired up this morning. So as we were talking earlier, but what I wanted to do is I wanted to kind of reiterate some of the things that were said on the last show about what's going on with that last meeting with Jerome Powell. That was something that I think we really need to take a close attention to. So you were old enough, the guy's name Volcker, right?
Paul Volcker.
Paul Volcker. So Jerome Powell said that he is going to start using the same strategies that he did back in the 80s in order to try to take care of inflation. But as we were talking, you lived through that inflationary period, correct?
I had a 15.75% mortgage.
Okay, but they weren't doing what? At the same time that they were manipulating these interest rates at the level that it's being done now.
The creation of money out of thin air wasn't happening at the rate that it's happening now.
And the rate today, I think, is one of the things that's very important. We're really, I believe that we're really trying to make people believe that if you don't use the word trillion with a T and you use the word billion with a B, that it's not a big deal when you just print it up and give it out. What's your take on that?
Well, one of the old senators, whose name I don't remember, once said $1 billion isn't what it used to be. And that's what's going on now. That we have not only price creep and inflation creep, we have propaganda creep. They're trying to convince us that $1 trillion is not that bad.
And that actually is one of the things that I'm concerned about. You had Jerome Powell, who was all about the printing of money through the coronavirus, but a year and a half ago that this whole thing was going to be transitory. Now, we have gotten ourselves to a point where in one meeting, everything changed. I'm not concerned about rising unemployment at this point in time like we were before. We can put ourselves into a recession. That's not as important today as it is to go ahead and get inflation under control. Those types of statements are a complete 180 from what he was saying before, which makes it think, are we going to these meetings to talk about the true Fed's agenda, or is this propaganda as well? Because I just don't see how you can go from one day to the other with such a huge change, because like we were talking about, stagflation is when you have rising inflation along with rising unemployment. So here's the bigger problem. If we find ourselves there, we know that that could be multiple decades that can create recessions, and we've seen this before.
There was a statement yesterday from one of the Fed people that one of the solutions is rising in unemployment. They want more unemployment. They're running from one leak to the other with a box of Band-Aids.
And that box of Band-Aids is really made for bullet holes right now. It's just not, the plan right now is to manipulate interest rates to try to slow down the economy, but at the same time just keep printing money. Let's give all the kids, let's take the money away from the Treasury that's due back to them for student loans, $1.3 trillion or whatever it is.
It's only $420 billion.
Just
it's not
to start.
A big number.
So we start with that, but then you take the inflationary numbers on that, and some of the economists are saying that 400 really costs about 7 or 8. Yeah. When you take those numbers into accountability with the loss of interest and everything else that is calculated into that return. What about product right now?
We're seeing a very noticeable squeeze on the product supply. More and more people are buying, fewer and fewer people are liquidating. It's not only people we deal with, it's with the wholesale market, and it's worldwide. People are just reacting to this by getting their hands on hard metal.
One more thing that you and I were talking about, and that is when countries find themselves in really bad economic times, what's something they tend to do?
Going back to the original kings, if you got a problem, you start a war.
And history has showed us this time and time again, Yesterday, we know that we have a pipeline that was sabotaged. We don't know by who or why, but it's definitely a slap in the face to Putin. And like him or hate him, you have to admit he's probably not the right guy to provoke.
Well, you don't start a fight with a guy who doesn't care what the outcome is. He's just not going to give in, and that's what's going on today.
So with all that being said, in gold prices and silver prices right now, they are recessed. Premiums are higher than we've seen in a long time, and not only that, the supply is right now harder and harder to get, and slowing down on how fast delivery times are coming in, and that is something that's a very realistic issue. So you had something to end with today?
I just want to read something from our history that we haven't learned from. This is from the year 1826. A judge in New York named Gideon John Tucker wrote, "No man's life, liberty, or property are safe when the legislature is in session." Have a nice day.
See you next week.